Helen McCourt and the Accord Centre campaign.
Yeehaw, hip,
Hip
hip,
hip, hooray! Okay. Well done, guys, and I know that they've won some money from the Scottish Government to pursue looking into a new centre, so I think that's a significant achievement. It's a significant achievement. Okay, and in terms of our other award, Luke Devlin and Equally Green, which is a new project to try and win jobs for poor communities within renewables, and to use methods of community organising to achieve that. So I think that's a good thing, and we had this first meeting just last month. It was well attended, and discussions are beginning with Skills Development Scotland and with a number of other organisations to pursue that. So again, hip hip hooray. Okay, and I'd like to invite Ian McInnes to the stage to discuss.
Discuss.
Okay. Good news.
Just tell us some good news.
Tell you some good news, folks. I've been quite happy sitting there, but prefer where I circle it, never mind. Yeah, so a wee bit of good news. In the Scottish Tennis Organisation has been, among others, a wee bit of recognition for our activities in Western Bartonshire, and I'll just read you this press release and then I'll explain a wee bit of background to it. The committee of the Western Bartonshire campaign against stock transfer met on the 21st of June to digest the news that Western Bartonshire Council has scrapped the stock transfer proposal, which we warmly welcome. This is the right decision for council tenants, council workers and the wider community in Western Bartonshire. The committee believe their campaign played a part in the decision to scrap this unwanted stock transfer, and want to thank thousands of tenants and residents who supported the campaign over the last 3 years. The council trade unions played a key role in the successful campaign and have to be congratulated. The main lessons to be learned from this successful campaign is that the whole community united and fought together for that just cause, and the campaign committee was made aware of and wished to thank tenants, trade unions, owners, some of the councillors, that's the ones that were sympathetic, and the Scottish Tenants Organisation. There will be a huge ongoing attacks on public services in the coming year, and the campaign plans to take a rest and rejuvenate itself to call for investment in public sector housing and to campaign on the issue of housing benefit and other thematic proposals to cut. So that is the good news. There's another wee fight that might need to happen, and that is that in today's, I think it was today's or yesterday's Guardian and our Observer, it was brought to our attention that housing benefits for under 25 could be scrapped. So the Prime Minister is to announce this shortly. A cutting from a previous time was that the headline on that one was that 50% cut in affordable housing budget as the SNP government manifesto turns to rubble. That was in the run-up to the recent local government elections. Now, it's interesting, we've got a debate going on at the present time about further devolution or independence or whatever for Scotland. And I've got 2 or 3 people here who are obviously of that bent, being in the SNP. And there are people out with the SNP who either also want independence or don't. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who want to ask questions about the ongoing situation, especially relating to cutbacks. In a recent poll, one of the main things that concerned people was the cutbacks. This was a poll carried out discussing the whole question about independence. Now, on the one hand, the SNP at the moment, being a majority in the Scottish Parliament, have been carrying out lots of cuts, but at the same time blaming those cuts on Westminster and saying if we'd had independence, the implication is we wouldn't have those cuts.
Can you give us a for instance there?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your for instances on it.
In terms of cuts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of cuts, there's been quite a lot of cuts to further education, and in terms of the people going to do hires and other courses at places like Anniesland College, Langside College, places like that, Cardonald and so on, in the west of Scotland.
So, what about the Western Barton scenario?
Yeah,
can you give us a bit of context?
Let's go back to the good news.
Yeah, but
yes,
he's quoting cuts when they don't actually exist, and I'd like to know where your facts come from.
All right, right.
Can we maybe get back to that once we've dealt with the success stories?
All I'm saying is, in relation to the discussion around cuts, is that there is a lot to debate there, and a lot of people who do want an independent Scotland want to know what an independent Scotland would mean.
Largely how they shape it themselves would be my comment, but let's keep with your story.
Anyway, we'll go back to the Western Bartonshire. And the situation in Western Bartonshire is that, or was, that there was a proposal, first of all, under, this is where the Twiddledee and Twiddledum that comes on, I would say, Labour or SNP can both be a bit dodgy at times. But anyway...
Would be your opinion.
But the thing is that Labour were in the ascendancy in the council there, and at one point they were for stock transfer of over 5,000 houses, which is roughly half the stock in the area. And the SNP were critical of them. And then the SNP got into the ascendancy. It was only a very slight majority in both cases when the swing went either way. And then the SNP decided that they were going to go down a similar path. So then Labour said they were against it. And obviously there was no point of principle here, because Labour seemed to just be against it because they didn't like the particular proposal and some aspects of the way it was made up. But in terms of the people involved in the campaign, it wasn't a case of parties, it was a case that they did not want their housing going to a halfway to privatisation situation, which is how the Scottish Tenants Organisation and how many tenants groups view stock transfer to a newly created housing association, or for their houses to be taken over by an existing housing association. Anyway, over the period, the two main groupings of tenants and owners, to some extent, two organisations, combined with a group of shop stewards and conveners from the trade union movement and supportive individuals, plus the Scottish Tenants Organisation from time to time lent support in numbers to help with distribution of leaflets and so on. And the basic thing is that possibly it's connected to the current austerity climate, that the money just ceased to be there, and it would become rather obvious that if they carried on with their proposal, it could possibly look really bad. And of course there are other elections coming up, and it probably wouldn't look too good in that regard for any of the parties. And it had been pointed out to leading people in the Scottish Government that in 2008, I mentioned the Observer earlier on, it was in the Observer, and various other leading newspapers, that both Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon had said that they would stop the onslaught on council housing, and that they would be recognised in the future as being a tenancy, a tenure of choice, and that and it would be funded, and more council houses would be built. And they have been true to their word in the sense that a lot more council houses have been built since the SNP came to power in the Scottish Parliament. However, from our standpoint, not nearly enough. We need tens of thousands. We don't just need a couple of thousand. And so anyway, I just want to wind up by saying that more power to local campaigns, elbows, and we don't go and direct campaigns. We support campaigns and try and get people to combine. And we're glad of our involvement in that. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come back to that later.
And in terms of during the election, obviously one of the things that we were looking to see was action on the private rented sector, to see better regulation and stronger regulation and more enforcement.
And you've pressed my button on that one.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of the private rented sector, I stay in the south side of Glasgow, and a number of us have been trying to gather evidence and campaign around the issue of both HMOs and the private rented sector in general, because it's pretty chaotic.
What's an HMO?
House of multiple occupancy.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're quite right to ask that. Because I can't stand people that use abbreviations and other people don't know.
They can be confusing.
And I've just done it. So
Okay.
but I've corrected myself.
I want it then.
But the thing is that across the city there have been a number of people who've been campaigning specifically on the houses of multiple occupancy issue, particularly in the West End, and increasingly in the South Side in the last 5 or 6 years. And I know it affects other parts of the city too, so don't want to leave anybody out.
No.
But one thing that another campaign that's been happening recently, because of the aggressive nature of the private rented sector in relation to its use of letting agents and their general way of carrying out their work. They are now, there is a situation where they quite often charge various fees that are currently illegal and have been illegal for decades. They've been doing this. But of course, another criticism of all governments currently and in the past is that they all talk about what a great role the private rented sector is carrying out in supplying housing. Now, I would question that. I don't think it's a case of rogue landlords. It's a case of, are we going towards what, in the worst sense of the word, the French would call a rentier society, where it's the people who are doing the renting that claim the name of rentiers in the society, because they are running the show. And who's behind them? The banks again. But there is campaigning against the fact that these landlords have got together to lobby the Scottish Government to make these illegal fees made legal. In other words, people are already paying, and then on top of that, they're often asked to pay other fees for all kinds of things. Just an administration fee, a here's your key fee, or whatever it happens to be.
And what is the Scottish legal perspective on that? There must be one.
Well, the legal, but there is not a Scottish legal perspective.
It
currently
must
is that
these within Scots law somewhere.
Currently, the situation is that these fees are illegal.
Right.
And a number of tenants and potential tenants have I've got challenged it. It says, right, we're going to small
and
debt court.
presumably.
They don't even need to go to court most of the time because
They
they back off because they know what they're doing is illegal.
So the point of part of the campaigning presumably is to empower more people to use the legislation that's in place for their fairness and safety, or?
Well, partly, but the main point of the campaigning is to ensure that they do not get away with turning what are currently illegal fees into legal ones. And the more publicity we make about this...
Are they in any danger of succeeding in that?
Well, I hope not.
Okay, but
it's
not
I'm very hopeful
about it, I understand.
I can't say, 100% that they won't win that concession. But I would...
pretty sure it won't happen.
I feel more than 50% that it will not happen.
Okay.
There's a lot of campaign going on. It's like a face of freckles across Scotland. There is a lot of campaign going on in this issue.
But there's a bit of positive news on this in terms of Glasgow.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a lot of focus on this during the election, particularly because as a result of the demolition of social housing in the city, more and more people are being pushed into the private rented sector, and it's badly regulated.
And that person's charged?
Well,
you posted them.
yeah, so that started to happen, and until recently anyway, Glasgow had 2 enforcement officers for the whole of the city, and Edinburgh has 9, so that gives you an indication.
Well, they've got trams to worry about as well.
Yeah, but there's to be a commission.
Yes, this is the one from Gordon Matheson has initiated this. It's a commission on factoring. Currently I'm trying to find out what the actual remit is on this, because so far most of the people who are on the committee, the board, whatever it is to be called, of this commission are mostly from the landlord side. But the people who are living in the houses are tenants.
I take it Sandra's involved.
In very many cases. The publicity put out by Glasgow City Council for this commission says that so many residents say something like 70% of tenemental properties and all this sort of thing. Well, I think he's got that wrong for a start. A lot of these tenements actually house, for the most part, tenants of owners who own 2 or 3 properties, or tenants of landlords who own lots of properties. And what we really need is a proper investigation to find out who owns what and have it properly publicised. At the moment, there is legislation which is being treated as voluntary. It's been made compulsory in terms of trying to get all landlords to be registered. And at the present time, there has been an increase in the number of landlords registered.
But surely HMRC must have a note of that. Yeah. They must have.
The thing the problem with it is that even if they're all registered, there is not made available, publicly available, the list of these landlords who are registered. Now, of course, first of all, being registered only means that you're registered. It doesn't mean that you're complying with anything except registration. However, backtracking slightly on this point about the gathering of evidence, for independent bodies to gather evidence, life is made a little bit difficult. Because if you want to find out if a particular property is registered to a landlord, then you go to your local council website, go to the appropriate part of that large website, and you type in the address. And if it comes up that this is being registered, then it'll tell you. And if it hasn't, it won't. So if you want to find out about an area, you're going to have to do that several thousand times. Whereas it should, in my opinion, be available, freely available. The list for the city of Glasgow should be available. For Edinburgh, for whatever local authority area, or a rural area, it should all be available.
I think kind of without it, you're not going to get a good picture.
Exactly. So we need to, as the lady said, get a clear picture of what the situation is. The dear woman to my right, depending on which way you're viewing it.
Absolutely.
But so that is something that is being worked on currently, and because it's needed, because it's very difficult to campaign adequately about an issue if you don't have the facts, and the facts are being denied.
Okay.
So a bit of transparency and clarity is needed there.
Yeah.
Okay.
When
So
do you want to know when I'm applying?
well, Liz.
No, it's just I can put that as a question to the national conference.
Oh yes, that's this month, isn't it?
Yes.
No, the national conference isn't until October.
Oh, is that one right? I was thinking of the.
Yeah.
But it can be phrased and passed and
yes,
take forward as a motion, and as it's probably very much should be.
Let's recognise the fact that although there's a lot of backstory there, two qualified, albeit qualified successes. First off, a campaign that's ran for 6 years or more just down the road in Clydebank, so on, has won.
Great.
And I think that's a great success. And secondly, the focus on the unregulated nature of the private rented sector has led to a commission that's been formed which is going to look into the issue. Now again, both those are qualified successes, but nonetheless there's an opportunity there to improve the situation.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of discussion at that point, and I'd like to maybe have a wee break so that we can continue the discussion for 5 minutes or so before we move on to the next part of the meeting.
Sure.
Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah.